So our guest is Dr. Mark Kovacs, consultant biomechanics, performance psychologist, researcher, professor, author, speaker for tennis and coach, former tennis player, NCAA champion, and Australian living in United States. How long have you been living? Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. Yeah, no, I grew up in Australia, played the junior Grand Slams, did all that, and then came over to college in the US and have been in the US for a long time, more than 25 years now. So it's been a great journey. Tennis has taught me a lot. It's really been a lot of fun.
So, in your professional career, you've worked with so many tennis players like Johnem Isnerem, Madison Keys, Sloane Stephens, many more players. And in this professional tennis, we can see that working with people like you, with professionals like you, it's getting more and more popular. For example, we can see Gavin McMillan working with Aryna Sabalenka. We know you say this a lot of times, you like to be in the shadow compared to, for example, Gavin McMillan. We can see him sometimes in her box, but can you tell us why it's getting so popular, why players want to work with professionals like you?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a great point. Like, over the last 20 years, the resources have got better. Players get paid more, so they have the ability to have more people on the team. That's not always a great thing, though. You see how big some of these teams are getting, so they're having multiple people there, but are they having the best people? And I do a lot of work in other sports as well, and the goal really is to get the best people, not necessarily the most amount of people. So that's just a caution to some of these people that I see 8, 10 people at tournaments working with a player. And that, to me, scares me when I see that, because there's a lot of voices. But the concept of bringing in the right experts for certain things is definitely important. And the pro coaches that are on tour full time, and I work with many of them, they're phenomenal at that job, which that job is managing an emotional environment. Every day at professional tennis is emotion driven. You have sponsor requirements, you have travel that affects sleep, you have tournaments, you have wins, losses, you have doubles, partners you got to deal with, you have significant others, friends, family, spouses that travel. You have to manage that world, and the best pro coaches are the best at that. They're really good at strategy usually, scouting opponents, figuring out how to play matches in those environments, prepping players for late in tournaments, which is a whole different dynamic than the first or second round. And the best pro coaches are the best at that. That's what they're designed to do and what they're trained over the years to do. Many of them aren't great at the technical side of tennis. Yeah. Many of them aren't great at movement and footwork and things like that, because that's not their training. That's not what they have to do every day. They get a pretty polished player most of the time. If you're working at the pro level, they're a really good tennis player. But all of them have things to work on. So now you're seeing a lot more of the best coaches anyway bring in these outside people to provide another set of eyes and expertise. Just like if you've got a back problem, you go to a back specialist. If you've got a shoulder problem, you go to a shoulder specialist. You don't go to someone who works on your ankle if you've got a shoulder problem. Same thing in these environments. If you've got a serve problem, go to someone who's really good at the serve. If you've got a movement issue, go to someone who really has trained hundreds of great players on how to move better and actually has results doing that. So it's not surprising at all to see it. What is surprising sometimes is how many decisions are made where they're bringing in, say, inefficient people or less experienced people than they should. These are the best players in the world. They have the most resources in the world, yet many of the times it's surprising to me in tennis. I don't see that as much in baseball or in basketball or in golf. They're looking for the best. They're like, I want the best, I want experience, I want people that have done this for a long time. And then reaching out for the best people. In tennis, a lot of the time, you don't see that. They're reaching out many times for the cheapest, who's available, who do I like. Those times aren't the best ways to make decisions.
Yeah, so we can say for you, so you compared the sports, for example, that tennis started a little bit later to trying to convince some of other coaches to join their teams. For example, NBA, it all started maybe a little bit earlier than in tennis.
Yeah, so I worked for a few years in the NBA with the Cleveland Cavaliers, and just for example, on our team, we had really about 10 players that you're focused on. They're your core of your team. You have other players that help to practice, but really you have about 10 players that make the team from a performance standpoint. We had more coaches than players.
Yeah.
We had player development coaches, we had shooting coaches, we had a movement coach, we had a defense coach, an offense coach, we have a tall big man coach, we have a guard coach, we have a head coach. We have all these people on a team, more coaches than players, which may be too much. If you speak to the old-time basketball guys, they'll tell you we had 3 to 4 coaches for the entire team back in the 90s or in the 80s. So it's maybe gone too far, arguably, too many voices, but the concept of specialized instruction is real and it's important. And you see that in baseball as well. You see that in golf, putting coach, driving coach. You have a short game coach. You have a course management coach now, which is sort of analytics coach. So it's very normal that tennis should be doing that. But it's just amusing to me sometimes watching, and I don't go to too many tournaments anymore. I work with a lot of different sports. People come to me, things like that. But every time I go to a tournament, it amazes me with how many people are added to teams now. And the concern to me sometimes is just the inexperience of a lot of them, especially at the highest level, top 10, top 20 players. I'm like, find the best people, the people that are going to help you go from 8 to 4 or 5 to 3. That jump is hard. We know once you get close to the mountain, they're all unbelievable. 1 or 2 points, that difference will make the difference. And even in serve percentage or serve speed, we're looking at data all the time, and 2 to 3 miles an hour is the difference in winning and losing matches many times on serve speed. If you can improve it by that much, you improve your break point percentage by 3%. That's a win. That's winning versus losing matches. So the margins are so small at the highest levels. I just urge the agents, the coaches, and the players, if they listen, to bring on the best people.
Yeah. Okay, Mark. So going more into the details of our favorite, lovely sport, which is tennis, I wanted to ask you about some specifics, especially in serve. Differences between pinpoint stance and platform stance, because we have seen, especially in women's tennis, for example, Madison Keys, she changed her from platform to pinpoint stance. Few months later, she won Australian Open. What do you think is the main advantage? Because we see so many, especially women's tennis players that are playing pinpoint stance, not platform stance.
Yeah, no, great point. I mean, Madison's a great example. Someone who trained with me is working on their team full time now over the last year or so. So I'm very close to that situation, know exactly why and what was done there for what reasons. So it's awesome to see that result. Her coach and her husband, Bjorn's done a great job of, utilizing good information, making adjustments. And as a former player himself at that really high level, he understood that requirement to be like, okay, there's one more step here. Where are we going to find it? And you saw serve improved, and there were some reasons why. So the difference really for most players is when they bring their foot up in the pinpoint. Many times they have trouble with their timing. That's why it's risky for some players, because they shift their weight too far forward too early and they don't load the back leg effectively. That's the negative of the pinpoint. It's a little harder sometimes to get into the back leg if you don't know what you're doing or if you're not loading in the right spot. However, more than 70% of players have a pinpoint stance. So it's the majority stance tennis, men and women. So it's one of those things, if you do it right, it's super effective. I mean, we can all talk about the best servers, and many of them are pinpoint servers. So John Isnerem, for example, Serena Williams, there's nothing wrong with a pinpoint. Pinpoint's a better serve sometimes if you do it right. The problem is we see a lot more bad servers that are pinpoint than platform. The reason being is they do it incorrectly, their timing's off. So that's the concern. It's one of those things, the risk reward. The reward's many times higher, but the risk of the bad serve possibility is also higher. Yeah. So you need to have good instruction there. The biggest difference is if you time it right, you get more vertical. So that's the big benefit in the pinpoint, because you bring your foot up, you drop both feet to the ground, back foot does its job correctly, and then you get more vertical. Hip displacement is the scientific term. So basically it's how high and how fast, not always how high, but how fast the back hip, so for a right-hander, it's the right hip, how quickly does that move upwards? That's the number one correlation with serve speed. So you can do it from a platform. Think about Pete Sampras. Everyone talks about how great Sampras' serve is, which it is. He had a platform serve. Milos Raonic had a platform serve. So there's so many great servers that do either. So I would recommend folks not focusing on one's better than the other. It's what physically can your athlete do? Do they have the right physical capabilities at that stage of development? And when we're juniors, it's very different again. Many players have shifted from platform to pinpoint throughout their junior career.
Me, for example.
The thing is, most players can do both serves pretty well. So that tells us that that's somewhat stylistic. It's not a fundamental. And I talk a lot about make sure you're very clear on the difference between style versus fundamentals. Yeah. There's only a handful of fundamental concepts that occur in the serve. Every good server has the same fundamentals. They all have very different style. And I think too many times coaches and even players overemphasize the style side because they want it to look like another player. Like at one stage, everyone wanted to look like Federer because he looks nice. He's got a nice looking motion. But what he does works for him, but it doesn't work for a lot of players because they don't have the same capacity to do those movements. So really risky copying players. And some great players have done that. They've come to me and said, I want to serve like this person. I'm like, yeah, but their flexibility is much better than yours. Their hip range of motion is much better than yours. Their thoracic extension is much better than yours. If you want to look close to that, we have to fix the physical side first before we really get you to that point. So that's the way we go about it. It's a physical and technical adjustment that needs to happen, and you need to understand both.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about Iga Świątek. Obviously, she's number 2 right now in the world, and our number 1 player, Polish tennis player, because she has never been a big server, but for now we can see kind of like it's her weakness a little bit. Her serve became her weakness. We can see a lot of changes in her serve, like the motion is it's different. It's kind of like less fluid. Also, her move of her wrist, it's different. But we see like she's struggling with controlling directions. She for sure works with Wim Fissette, and they put some changes in her serve. So why do you think for now it's not really working? So you think she needs more time to use those changes so she can like serve better, or why it could be like this?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I always cautioned for people to observe from the outside and try to make understand what they're working on, because behind the scenes I don't know that situation at all. But I know similar situations in the past with players that are making changes, and you see a piece of what they're trying to do. They may be working a plan that may take 3 months. They may be working on little things that are observable, but there's a lot of other things that are happening that you don't see. So it's really hard to know what they're trying to do because you're only seeing it from tournament to tournament and things like that. However, your point about the data shows that it's not improving. It's potentially getting worse. If you actually we looked at some numbers on serve speed from last year to this year at the end of May. So up till May, end of May of the 25, the serve speed's gone down 11 kilometers an hour, which is really significant. So that tells me there's either an injury that no one knows about, possibly. So she may have some problem, and that's why they're making all these changes. They're trying to hide the pain somehow and trying to adjust, or they've made a technical adjustment that is not working at all. So it's probably one or both of those, because 11 kilometer an hour reduction in serve speed is significant. For the folks that are in miles per hour, that's about 6 miles an hour. So you don't see that usually at a high level going down. Every now and then you get to see it going up that much, but going down, not many people are like, I want to serve 11 kilometers an hour slower next year. I don't think anyone goes into training with that plan. So something's happening, obviously. Her serve percentage hasn't really dropped, though, which is interesting. So her first serve percentage is about the same. Number of aces is about the same. She doesn't serve a lot of aces. She's in a two to 2.5 aces a match. So it's not her game to serve aces. But normally when you see that big of a drop, you either see serve percentage go up because they're serving lower, trying to be more cautious. They're trying to place it better. But if you don't see the serve percentage go up and you don't see it go down, then you're definitely putting yourself in a negative position. Less 3 points, less short balls off the return that you get to hit. Your serve plus one patterns aren't as potent because you're not getting that, for her pretty much that forehand that she wants to hit, you're not getting that forehand after the serve as often. So there's obviously, just looking at data, not knowing specifically what they're working on or not working on, you can see that it's not working right now. And in my experience, if you make a change, a technical change, I see it that day. You see improvement that day at that level. They're the best athletes in the world. They don't need 3 months, 6 months to fix a problem. If they're in the adjustment, you see the improvement that day. They may not be perfect on execution on day one, but you see the speed go up. You see the efficiency improve. You see them feel that felt more effortless. You see those things with good technical adjustments. The problem with many players is they're stubborn. They don't want to change because it doesn't feel exactly the same as their old way, even though their results, if you show them data, hey, you're serving harder, it feels easier, but then they'll say things like, yeah, but it's not what I'm used to, or I don't really want to change because they're worried that maybe it'll be worse in a week.
So I don't trust this.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the great part about great athletes. They're stubborn. They believe in themselves. They have faith in what they are and what they do, and they're positive typically in those respects. But for many of them, the best ones, it's hard for them to make adjustments sometimes because it could backfire, and there's a fear many times that, hey, I'm 2 in the world, I'm 5 in the world. Yeah. Do I really want to make an adjustment? Do I really want to change something? But the best players, best athletes I've ever been around are all willing to make an adjustment if you can show them data, explain why it's going to work, what the risk versus reward is, and then if they fully commit. If they fully commit, they always do well with it. The problem becomes many times there's other people around the player sometimes that may be questioning it. Do you really want to do that? Do you really want to change? Hey, you're doing great where you're at. Yeah. I always say the enemy of great is good. Yeah. If you want to be great, you have to get through good. And getting through good is really, really hard because you're getting results, you're getting a lot of money, you're doing well, you're doing fantastic actually, but there's always another level. And with Igi's situation, for example, she's chasing her own shadow. She's the best player in the world, give or take, You know, at certain periods of time on certain surfaces, she is the best player in the world. So when you're at that level, a little drop, and to me, 11 kilometers an hour drop in surf speed is not little. It's a significant drop. That's the difference between 1 in the world and 5 in the world, probably. If we take that out over the course of the rest of the year, it'll probably, if something doesn't shift, odds are she'll get beaten more frequently by players that she wouldn't have lost to last year, just because of that difference. So you're definitely right with what you're seeing. There's something going on there, and it's important, hopefully, that they sort of figure out what the cause is.
Yeah. So you spoke about changes and adjustments, and we said that she's changing her motion, and we can see that it's kind of progress, but some things are not changing, and I can see, in my opinion, that it's not helping her during her serve. When she's going to the trophy position, her right foot is exactly on the same level as her left foot, so it's not like behind, but it's tough for her to get the power from that back leg, as you said, yeah? So it's first thing, and second...
It's a great point.
Yeah.
In our tennis serve specialist certification, we have a checklist for coaches predominantly that highlights where the leaks are in serves and where the fundamentals need to be. So you sort of see the problem, and then you see what it should be. And that foot around motion is one of those ones that there are players that get away with serving with that because they end up using their abdominals more and they use their arm, shoulder, and elbow. So every player that does that foot around for an extended period of time ends up, one, having some pretty significant injuries over time. Their abdominals and their shoulder or elbow end up breaking down at some point. And that's just a kinetic chain issue, meaning that if your legs aren't loading correctly, your abdominals and core, lower back need to do more, and then the shoulder and elbow need to do more. So it's just a inefficiency of technique. And that typically is a relatively easy fix. I've done that with a lot of players that have that issue, and many times the players don't realize it. They don't realize it's bad. It's just been over time, slowly, gradually shifting more and more. And that's just practice and awareness. That's just being on them on a daily basis. And once they get the right mechanics, they usually have it for life at that point. Because it's, you have your front foot that gives you awareness that you actually hit your front foot. That's a good thing. Your back foot comes into your front foot rather than your back foot coming around. And for folks that aren't that familiar with what we're talking about, why is that not a good thing? When your foot comes around, your hips open up early. When your hips open up, your shoulders open up early. When both of that happens, you end up facing the net at contact with your shoulders and your hip. And that puts a lot of strain on your abdominals, on your lower back. You can still hit the serve relatively hard, but you're going to have less power. And potentially that may be part of the cause of why her serve speed has dropped as well, because her foot has potentially come around that.
Yeah, so you think more difficult thing is to change the motion than changing those problems with right foot and, for example, left arm that is not straight enough after her toes. So you think it's because it's interesting that she's changing all the time the motion that should be harder to change than those two things which are, in your words, more easier to change, yeah?
Yeah, so it's a great point. So when we're talking motion, many times people are talking arm action, the arm action of the motion, and there's a lot of style that goes into the arm action. Yeah. There's only a few spots that really matter in the tennis serve. How you start doesn't matter. It may impact other factors, but if we look at the 10 best servers ever, you pick your 10 best servers, compare them side by side, they all have a very different start. Their foot positions are different, their take backs, some are long, some are short, some are abbreviated, their ball toss heights are all varied. That all is style. What every single one of them do is they get into stage 3, which is the loading stage, the trophy kind of position. They get into that position correct. Their hips and shoulder plane is approximately similar. So about a 45-degree shoulder angle back and down. They're loading their back leg effectively, whether they're pinpoint or platform. That's the position that's important. And how they start, how long their backswing is, all of that is a stylistic thing. And players do that based on arm length, based on how they grew up, based on their comfort in what they do. And you've got to be careful changing that, because that can really impact a lot of other things. But getting stage 3 loading correct is really, really important. And that's where the foot comes up as well. Yeah. Stage 3. Yeah. So that all comes to one position that if you can fix that, that helps tremendously. So we always want to get that position dialed in first before we do anything else in the motion, because that's our core position. And then from there, we can make adjustments, before, after, things like that, based on a few things that we're looking to work on. So I agree with you that the start that they're tinkering with is probably there's something they're thinking will help later. But if you don't fix the real fundamental, that starting position, whether actors, all of that, that's all start.
Yeah.
So one more about Iga, because obviously players are in Rome right now, but just last week she lost to Coco Gauff, and actually she lost pretty easily. And after this match, she said, my movement is not intuitive. I'm forcing myself to make little steps. She used to do a lot of those little steps. So do you think it's more about being automatic or just losing confidence? Why is it like that?
Yeah, it's a great point. Hey, she's a great athlete. She's a great mover, athletically. She's never, I would say, been the best tennis-specific mover, but she's a great athlete. There's a lot of players that make up for some lack of efficiency in movement with just being great athletes. There's many of them that we can point to. So I'm not sure what she's thinking exactly when she says that. Many times that may be a confidence thing, because is she doing something different with her movement from last year? Maybe not.
We can see for sure more big steps than little steps. I'm not saying those are huge steps or is just one step. It's just like
I think she has a problem to get into the right. Oh my God, what's that?
Oh,
okay, it's cool. Anyway, so she has a problem with getting into the right distance into the ball. So I think that's the main issue. What she was trying to say.
Yeah, no, I think what you're referring to and what she's referring to is she feels like her spacing getting to those balls is not efficient, so she's off a little bit. So, and that's the difference between hitting a ball offensively versus defensively. Sort of 20 centimeters, 30 centimeters difference is huge in tennis. And that's the debate between small steps, big steps. We know that it's faster to get from A to B with big steps. That's undisputable. That's why the best sprinters in the world, the 100-meter athletes, the ones that win, take less steps. They put more force into the ground. They're in the air longer. They're on the ground less. Same in tennis. If you want to get from A to B fastest, you take bigger steps. However, in tennis, that's important is you have to stop at some point or slow down, and you have to hit a ball. So to stop and slow down, you do need to do some adjustment. It may be smaller steps, or your timing of the big steps need to be more precise. And because she's trying to change some of that later in her career, it's not natural. She's been doing a certain movement for 15 years, and now all of a sudden they're like, hey, let's take your natural movement that you've been doing for 15 years and let's make it bigger and bigger and bigger, which is probably the right thing to do in theory if you're looking at it from purely a data standpoint and what does the science say. But that's the difference between coaching and the best players in the world and sitting in a lab doing research. The research data would say bigger steps is better, which is no doubt from A to B, it'll get you there faster. But if you can't slow down efficiently, if you can't make contact with the ball in the right spot because your step count was slightly off, you're going to miss hit a lot. And that seems to be the growing pains that she's going through. So the question becomes, do they stick with that and continue to work on those bigger steps and get her better and understand that she's going to miss a few balls here and there because she's not going to get the timing perfect every time? But the goal will be over the next 3 months, 6 months, however long they think until she masters it. Could that make her a better long-term player? And could that put her in position now to win more and more slams? So we've seen it in golf. If you think about Tiger Woods, Tiger Woods was the best golfer in the world, completely changed his swing. Everyone was like, why would you do that? Because he thought that for him to be the best for the next decade, he needed to get better at certain things, and they revamped things. That's kind of the same concept, I would guess, is what they're working on. Is like, hey, you're great, but you've got a lot of competition. You've got your 2 or 3 big competitors that are right there with you right now, in Coco and Ariana and a couple others that are right there. But then you've got all these young kids coming up, the Andreevas of the world and the next generation that are coming up that are gonna be big at blasters. They're gonna put pressure on you, and if you're a step slow or if you're not in the right position, it's gonna be tough. And maybe that's the mindset: is we're really good right now, but we want to be the best ever, or we want to put ourselves in that discussion. So we're going to have to improve these areas, which is typically what I see in the best players. That's how they think. The question is, do they have the right people around helping to ensure that that process is as efficient as possible?
Especially it's important for her when we see her western grip of the forehand, and we can see so many players playing deep into her forehand, making her trouble. And if she's maybe a little bit too slow in this grip, it's very tough to control. So it's so important thing to her to be intense.
100% right. I mean, we see the same thing with Coco Gauff. I mean, Coco's a great athlete, great player, but she has some technical challenges that if she's not physically perfect, she's off just a little bit and sprays balls, forehand breaks down. But when she's on and she's perfect with all the movements, she can make it work. So same thing with Igi. It's the same. I mean, that's the best players in the world. I always say people critique the best players in the world, but they don't always understand from day to day, a 1, 2, 3% difference in how they feel is the difference between winning and losing. And it's so hard from day in, day out to maintain their high level and what their expectations are. That's why when you look at results like, Federer's semi-final results, I don't know if you know that stat, how many times he made a semi-final in a row. I think it was some exorbitant number, like it was in Grand Slams. It was some crazy number, like 30 times in a row or something. So that consistency is what a lot of these players are looking for, and it's hard. So it's definitely fun for us to observe from the outside to see, okay, what are the changes? What can she do to get better? And she's great for the game. It's great having those different styles. I mean, if you talk about those top 3 girls right now with Coco, Ariana, and Igi, they play so different. It's so much fun when you watch them compete because their styles are so different.
Okay, so the very last one, but for young players, so how important is to develop other things such as like physics and actually mental performance, like physical performance, play other sports, not to just focus on tennis, to become one of the best players in the world in the future?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question. So, the big discussion of how much tennis at a young age, should you do other sports, should you just play tennis? So and I've spent 20 years sort of working in this space, in this development space of getting great juniors into pros and making them the best they can be. And we have a few different things you have to talk about. One is it's not one or the other. Like a lot of people say, playing only tennis is bad, playing other sports is good. That's not necessarily the argument. What it is if you are going to specialize and play tennis as your sport at a high level as a junior, and you're not going to play organized other sports, whatever they are, then you have to make sure that you're doing some other sports for fun, recreationally, play some other sports unofficially, and that your off-court training is very diverse, meaning that you're going to kick, you're going to throw, you're going to catch, you're going to roll, you're going to jump, you're going to stop, start. You're going to do all these movements so that you develop those other skills. You don't necessarily have to go play soccer or basketball or volleyball or whatever it is in a team and formally go practice twice a week and play games and things like that. So I always advise folks that that's the better option, is to play the other sports because it's easier, it's structured, you don't have to think. But there's plenty of players that love tennis, don't really like the other sports. So why play it if you don't really like it, first off. But you also, the one thing that people don't talk much about at 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, if you're playing 20 hours a week of tennis and these other athletes are playing 10 hours a week of tennis, 10 hours a week of other sports, the person that's playing 20 hours a week of tennis usually is going to beat the person that's playing 10 hours a week of tennis at that age. Doesn't mean they're going to be good at 18 or 20, but at 9, 10, 11, 12, they're probably going to beat the kid that plays half as much tennis. So people rarely talk about that the more you play at a young age, the more you usually win at a young age, which isn't necessarily a good thing long term, but you still have to address it. You still have to realize that most kids don't want to lose. So if you're making a decision at a young age and you're going to play a lot of tennis, make sure you do all those physical skills that you need to develop, because the better athletes are the better tennis players now. I mean, if you look at the top 3 or 4 players on the men's side, top 3 or 4 players on the women's side, they're arguably the best athletes in the sport, which is not surprising to me, but you won't have to have great genetics, obviously. They've all got genetic abilities that most players don't have. Height is many times one, speed is another one, power is another one. You can train that to an extent, but you have to have the genetic capabilities. But what we do know is if you train the right way for 10 years, you're going to get really, really good at speed, strength, power, mobility, flexibility, mental capacities, all these things. But you've got to train them, with a plan, and you've got to think long term. Too many times people think very short term. And I'm lucky because I get to work with the best athletes in the world at the young ages who are trying to become the best athletes in the world. So they're the best at 14, they're the best at 16. And you have to be in the mix, meaning that you don't have to be the absolute best at 14 or 16, but you have to be competitive with the best in the world. You have to be making quarterfinals, semifinals, that type of level. So don't overemphasize results, but also don't underemphasize results. Too many coaches, too many parents sometimes give the kids too much leeway. Hey, results aren't important. I'm like, the data says if you're going to be great, you're going to be really good. Not necessarily the best in the world, but you're going to be really good at 16, at 17, at 18. Most of the best players in the world were the best in the world at 16, 17, 18. Most of them.
Yeah, especially it's good to see for the kids results. They are training, they are practicing, so they see that they are winning some matches. Yeah, it's always also very important to see. So yeah, it's absolutely true, because it's great point that we have some kind of contrast between absolutely don't care about the results and absolutely focusing on results. It's great to have something between. It's I think good message to parents.
Yes. Mark, thank you. Yeah. Joe, go ahead.
I was just going to say, thank you so much. I really appreciated the time being here, chatting. We should do this again later in the year. And keep up the good work.
Okay,
Perfect. We will do for sure. Thank you so much for your time and all of those interesting information, and hopefully to hear again from you soon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have
Mark.
a good day.
Thank you, Mark.